Welcome to the Growth Engine podcast. In today's episode, we're joined by Jasper Martens, Chief Officer of PensionBee. In a world where pensions have often taken a backseat to more immediate concerns, Jasper emerges as a passionate advocate for change. With an unwavering determination, he is steering the course of PensionBee, an innovative platform aimed at rekindling the significance of pensions in people's lives. Jasper recognises that while pensions may have been seen as complex and perhaps mundane in the past, they hold the key to securing a bright and fulfilling future. Drawing from his considerable experiences, Jasper's journey has been nothing short of remarkable. His previous role at Simply Business, where he spearheaded the digital transformation of business insurance for SMEs, served as a testament to his ability to transform seemingly complicated financial products into accessible and empowering solutions. Jasper, welcome. Thanks for giving up the time joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Quite an intro.
Absolutely, all completely correct as well. I'm sure sometimes it's harder to hear it when it's about yourself, but no, thank you very much. To kick us off, I'd like to go right back to the beginning of when you first joined PensionBee as a startup, fintech startup. Can you explain what your remit is initially when you started? Am I right in saying that was pre-launch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I moved from Simply Business to PensionBee, there was no product. So there were two co-founders, Romy Safova and Jonathan Lister Parsons, and they just got together themselves a few months before that.
Wow.
And they were looking for somebody who can help them to launch the solution, as in finding your old pension pots and move them into one place, in a way that consumers would understand and would take actions on. So yeah, we were ending up in a room with 5 people and some seed funding and no line of code written.
Wow.
And coming from a background where you are working with quite a large team, because it's great those results you've mentioned, but actually there's always a team working with you to achieve those results. I ended up in a room that was 12 square meters, very, very kind of like onto each other, working on press releases, campaigns and everything. Doing a million things in one day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a bold move after leaving,
Yes.
relatively safety, shall we say, and jumping into hugely unknown.
I think I was in a relatively, I would say, safe position. But when I met Romy Safova for the first time, within 5 minutes, my first response was, why didn't I come up with this idea?
Right, yeah.
And that's always a really good starting point,
Yes,
because then you think there is something really, really great about this particular problem she's trying to solve with Jonathan.
Yeah.
And I can see myself helping them to achieve the goals of PensionBee. But taking a leap into the deep is quite something.
And just for viewers and listeners, to give this some context for how long ago this was.
I joined PensionBee in September 2015.
Okay.
That was also the time, I would say, a lot of other financial fintech startups were starting to emerge. So you had Mondo, which is now Monzo, Revolut and all of them. And they were all kind of like, well, they're either a little bit further ahead or they're in the same stage. And I think it was a time where a lot of these companies were starting to come alive.
Right.
Quite a lot of them have disappeared. And fortunately, PensionBee hasn't.
Going back to you first came in, 5 of you sitting in a room. What was your kind of remit? So you came in as heading up the marketing side.
Yeah, I was the marketeer.
Okay.
And for us, it was really important that we were building a product that was actually customers really wanted. So having also input into the product that's being built, well, if you're with 5 people, it's pretty obvious that you will have that input. But the main thing was, okay, here's a small amount of money. It's nothing compared that we can do today. How can you market this product through things like a PR campaign, or through a Facebook campaign, or through an Instagram campaign, or a pay-per-click campaign? All of those things. And can you test them as small as possible? And can you see, is there attraction? Do you see that people actually like this and they start to sign up? Can you get the insight that how you're advertising it, your proposition, does it actually resonate with the right type of customer? So I would say in the first year, we were mainly not trying to grow as fast as possible, but actually trying to figure out, can we acquire customers? Is there a problem? And do we have the solution to solve? Which marketing channel can we use to attract those customers? And if so, is it the right type of customer? That was my first year.
I don't know if I'm jumping to conclusions here, so rein me back in if I've got this wrong. Are you saying that a central part of the marketing was also shaping the design of the product?
Yeah.
By seeing what resonated with the audience to see what would be features or benefits that would go into development?
Based on also the marketing campaigns you run, you start to receive some feedback, as in, does a campaign tank or does a campaign perform really well?
Yeah.
Why is that? Is it the message? Is it the channel? And so forth. So a lot of you are trying to figure out if what you thought would be a really great idea, a problem you want to solve, and therefore you start or you launch a particular product, does it resonate? It's one of the reasons I think that Romy and Jonathan brought me on board from the start. A lot of financial fintechs might actually get a marketer on board much later on in the journey.
Yeah.
Actually having somebody in marketing on board from the start does really help.
Yeah.
And therefore you will also refine the product. I wouldn't say shape it completely, but that feedback really helps into the product build.
We were mentioning before we came on air about that I've been consuming all of the content that is on your LinkedIn, which I'd thoroughly recommend listeners to go and look at if they want to get more insight on this. There's a PowerPoint on there where you talk about using the content-driven approach for this test and learn, and it being social being a great channel to do this, presumably because of the immediacy of the feedback. But can you talk me through the kind of methodology that you put in place to gather those insights?
I think first, really good to understand that pensions are not exciting. They're being perceived as exciting. I would say you're not selling a Ferrari. So it's a pension product. And my background in commercial insurance, again, if you are supporting small business owners by providing them with small business insurance, they're not starting a small business because of the insurance. It's something they just have to buy. It's not an exciting thing. So how do you turn something that might be perceived as boring, complicated, difficult into something that's really exciting and really lights people up? I think that's a challenge. And that's why you've got financial marketeers. I think that's our job. That's part of our job to get that right. So knowing from the start that selling pensions is not going to get you customers, but empower people with the right information at the right moment in time on the channel they use, that's probably going to be very powerful. Nobody's going to read a 30-page booklet about pensions, but they will watch a 2-minute video about why pension consolidation is a good idea, or why contributing X amount in the pension can give you that retirement you always want to have when you are retiring eventually. So knowing that you can turn something boring into something nice and exciting, and people will be switched on by that, that's really powerful. Then you will need to understand, okay, if I use that content and then use it on the right channels, so where people actually are, especially at the start and still today, but people are not on your website reading a prospectus, but they are on their phones, on their commute, and that's where you want to be.
Yeah.
And get those two things right, create the right content in the right moment in time, and choose your channel wisely. I think that is probably the way you want to test your channels.
That term you used there about the right content at the right moment in time, it takes me back that Google did there was a lot of marketing collateral that Google themselves put out about moments that matter. Is this something that you were thinking about in that sense of the right content for the moments that matter in the pensions purchase cycle? Is that what you're referring to?
When do people think about potentially bringing their old pensions together into a new online plan that they can manage on their device anytime, anywhere, excuse the plugin? But that's what we do. There will be moments in time where people are more open to do that and take action. So for example, when they move jobs. Yeah. And there are many ways you can target people who've just moved jobs. When they buy a house, would you believe it? And then there's also like an age group, and I call it always the oh shit moment. It's usually around your 40th birthday. It's when you've had a couple of jobs already, and your income has gone up, and you think, oh gosh, it's only 15 years before I can start taking that money out. How much do I have? Panic mode. So, and there are ways where you can target consumers at that particular moment in time. Yeah. So there are some of these moments, these key life decisions, and for a pension consolidation solution, that is probably a good place to start, and that's what we did.
A couple of things I just want to learn more about. You talked about the importance of creating a hook. What is that hook that you're referring to?
A great piece of content that actually resonates. Can you hook it on a news event? Is there a particular life moment you can hook it on? So I think for me, it's more around, if you tell somebody 20 times, thou shalt consolidate your old pensions, it probably will be forgotten. But if the hook is, well, if you consolidate your pensions, when you buy a house, X and Y will happen in your favor, or in the news, alternate enrollment will be extended, there's going to be, etc. So whether it's news hopping or anything else, I think when you can find a good hook to hang your story on, it will stick with the customer.
So it's essentially about using a hook to create a more powerful retrieval cue in order to stimulate that consumer to take action.
Yeah. In the early days, we also, when you are small and your budgets are limited, you're trying to get reach cut through.
Yeah.
So, for example, the pension industry is not particularly known of being innovative and cutting edge, especially when it comes to, for example, transferring your pension from your old provider to a new provider.
Sure.
And of course, that's what we do. And we've got a lot of data for each provider. We know how long it takes to transfer a pension, how long it takes for them to pick up the phone, et cetera, et cetera. If there is something then in the news that talks about it's so hard for pension transfers, and if there's a news item that suggests 20% of pension providers still prefer paper transfer forms rather than electronic transfers, then I've got a perfect story to bring into and say, well, this is our data, and therefore the Robin Hood Index was born. We were able to campaign, and our index was published in newspapers.
Right, fantastic.
So that's the kind.
So you're becoming the news story.
Yeah, you're trying to, but it's so I think news is usually a really good way of hanging your proposition on.
Yeah. Test, learn, optimize, amplify. Now, this is absolutely central to the startup approach. Again, for people working on lean budgets, this is completely critical, isn't it? Because ultimately what we're trying to do as marketers is gain effectiveness and improve. Can you talk us through that, how you started that approach and how you the impact that started to have on the business?
And that mentality, doesn't matter how small or big you are, I think you still need to have that mentality. Otherwise you're just wasting money for the sake of it. When you are small, let's say you can only spend £100 on a particular Instagram campaign to see if you can actually get clicks or sign-ups. Have 5 or 10 different variations and have £100 on each variation. And after a couple of £100 you've spent, do you start to see a difference? Is there a better click-through rate? Is there a better sign-up rate? At PensionBee, we've got our own data platform firmly built into the company, so I can see from a particular paid keyword, not only do they actually click, no, I can see, do they sign up?
Wow,
I can also see how many pension pots do they add? What's the AUA of the asset administration per customer? So how valuable is a customer? We can relate it back on keyword level. Wow. So it does allow you to test with really small budgets, but you can start to see what's the actual impact. And therefore, when you then say things like optimize, well, for example, pension consolidation on a paid keyword is probably a good keyword to focus on.
Yeah.
But is, for example, something like lost pension, is that a good keyword? Well, actually, you get a lot of clicks from lost pensions because everybody wants to find out lost pensions.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to consolidate.
Right.
So that's what you then find out. Therefore, you optimize. So within that paid search campaign, you might want to devalue that keyword because you're not looking for that kind of customer. But you are looking for somebody who types in consolidation pension. So I think that's the kind of optimization. And you can do that on keyword, you can do it on creatives. In the early days when Instagram was our biggest acquisition channel, would you believe it? It's different these days. We would have easily 5 or 10 different creatives, inexpensively produced, but according to our brand guidelines, stock video sometimes, quickly testing is the consolidate my pensions versus be in control of your pension. What do we see in terms of performance? That's what that means. And what's interesting is you learn so much on the go. So when you then scale up, because something does work, you want to refine that and build on top of that kind of success. It does help you to understand that when you then scale up campaigns, at least you're doing it with some data, underfunded by data, and understanding, okay, that's the kind of message that resonates with the right type of customer.
When you were in the thick of this, doing this in that early stage, was it very much still as an always on, constantly having content out in the marketplace, or was it more campaign driven?
That's a very good question. I would say it's always been a mix of both. In the beginning, it probably would have been much more of an always on approach. So limited budgets, but your channels are always switched on. Yeah. So you drip feed customers, and especially at the start, you're mainly focusing on lower funnel campaigns, more conversion campaigns. Once you start to realize that those channels, you can scale them up to a certain point, and then saturation kicks in, or it becomes more expensive to acquire those customers, no matter what you do, no matter how much you test or refine, then in our case, brand channels became more and more important. And that's where more campaign-led advertising can come in. Yes. You can't be on having a mainstream television campaign all the time. So you particularly look at when do you want to run these campaigns for the long term, but also there are some moments in the year in financial services, as we all know, January, February, March, and September and October. Those are kind of like key months that people think about their finances. So maybe run those campaigns on top. So I guess it's always been a bit of a combination. Today, it is more and more campaign driven and less always on. Yeah. We are always on, but as a percentage of budget spent, I would say campaigns are taking much more of a prevalent.
A lovely segue into the next part that I want to move into, which is where I guess the next stage of the evolution that you've gone through with PensionBee. You mentioned it there, but I'm going to just read out this line again from this time from an article that exists on PensionBee's site. At any time in a company's growth cycle, especially for a fintech company like PensionBee, there'll be a time where simply growing through digital channels isn't enough. Can you expand on what you mean by that statement? You've started there already, but I think it's such an interesting point that I'd like to dive in.
Let's say you're able to spend £500,000 a year on marketing. Let's say that is your budget. For a mass market product like PensionBee, you can probably spend that very wisely on digital channels alone. Sure. So you can do mainly performance campaigns. By the way, the whole performance and brand campaigns, don't quite like it. It's both these days. Like when you run a Facebook or you run a digital campaign, it's both really. But the emphasis will be a CPA driven. You can easily do that. So you build a bit of brands, you can acquire customers at scale, you can drive optimizations, you can bring down your CPA, you can easily do that. But we had bigger ambitions because we're a mass market product and we want to get a big share of the pension market. I mean, big share, a couple of percentage points. I mean, in our world, that means a huge company. So in order to achieve that, what you will find, you can't simply pump more money into those acquisition channels. I call it a drug addiction. Mm-hmm. Like you can't just keep injecting more money into a channel and think you get the same high or the same result. Actually, you get diminished returns. Yeah. And that is because there are other ways to supersize your brand, to build brand, that people start to know you more. So I think that's what I mean by that. And we had a moment where we thought, okay, we've got some great digital channels. We are able to invest in them. But our CPA is creeping up. Mm. And it wasn't a case of like, what is that panic button? No, it was more about, okay, maybe it's now time. We've got a bigger budget now available to start taking our first leap into more brand-led channels, higher up the funnel, start building brand awareness. Like brand awareness back in the day was like 5%. Now our point to brand awareness is 52%. Right. So once you start investing more in your brand channels, then the saturation points of your lower funnel channels will actually start to go up. So you can actually acquire more customers through those acquisition. You're widening your upper funnel. So you also hopefully, in our case we did, widening your lower funnel. Yeah. So it's just increasing that saturation point in those acquisition channels by using more brand. It's not rocket science, but I think a lot of people do not want to take that point, do not know how to take that point, or are being held back by decision makers in the organization to do that. Now, fortunately at PensionBee, we didn't have that issue.
This is a fascinating story. Why is that? Why did you not have that issue?
Couple of reasons. First of all, I'm just being blessed with a great management team. Everybody is still there from the start.
Right.
We are still there. It's unusual. Also for a CMO to be in a role for more than 3 years is unusual.
Yes, yeah.
So there is a huge amount of trust between the people, and I can't do this without Romy, our CEO, or even our CFO. So that's that point. That does really help. Second, from the start, it was very obvious, and this is a skill I learned from some great people at Simply Business, like Alistair Douglas and Jason Stockwood, the two CEOs. You need to talk spreadsheets. That's my translation. So what you're trying to do, can you translate it into something that has a bottom line? Like, do this, and you achieve that. And at PensionBee, that journey has continued. And our management team predominantly comes from a financial background. So instead of going against them, it was actually, how can you help me to prove a point that we need this? And that's what happened.
Yeah.
So can you translate building a brand into what that means in terms of customer growth, in terms of your cost per acquisition, etc.? The third point I would say is you can start small on brand channels. There's a kind of a myth that you have to go big in order to build a brand. Actually, you can't be further from the truth. You can start small. So to give you an example, on television, we're spending quite a lot of money on television these days. But we started with £50,000 in 2019 on a performance daytime TV campaign with a great agency back in the day we worked with. We were buying spots on the day, and I was able to see in our data set if we saw any like effects, isolating the white noise. So see what is the uplift. So we were buying sometimes 50 or £100 spots on like Dave +1 to see if we can actually get an uplift. So again, we started small. We did saw uplifts. We could actually track conversions back. Now we all know that is just a small part of the story. There is the bigger long-term piece,
of course,
which you can explain. But on the short-term piece, we said, okay, what is the CPA we will expect as a direct response on that particular channel, knowing that it will probably be 2 or 3 times higher than what we normally would expect on another acquisition channel. And that's how we started. You do it for a few months, and hey, oh, guess what happened? We start to see conversions. And over time, that CPA started to slightly drop. So let's not do 50, but let's do 100K a month, see what happens. So you test and learn, you refine. Those ads look very, very direct response-y. And, by the way, I'm proud of everything I do. But I would say we've got better examples these days, but that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. It served the purpose to remove you.
It served the purpose. And we did the same. And then you start to get to a point where you can't measure all of these individual things anymore because you're on TV all the time. Yeah. And then you take the leap. But at least you take the leap from a much more comfortable place rather than, I don't do TV. We're going to do a £500,000 campaign in January because that's what my media agency told me what to do. Yeah. And let's pray into all the conversion and marketing goals that I get some sort of results. And that's just not going to happen. You get stung, and then a company says, let's not do that anymore. So I always would say with these things, if you can start small, do a billboards campaign in a particular region, and then run a prompted brand awareness study afterwards. Can you see uplift, yes or no? And take it from there.
What were the other brand channels that you activated in conjunction with the daytime spots?
Nothing.
Just that. That's where you were. Yeah.
And if we did run other things, so we did have a billboard campaign, an out-of-home campaign, at least you can work out what your baseline traffic is. Yeah. And then you can see these little peaks. So you can kind of see, do you see uplift? Now, a lot of people watching this will think, wow, that's very performance-like. Brand is... As a brand, yes, it is. But this was a really good way for us to understand if our product is so good and our solution is so good that actually we get the response, even if it's a click. It doesn't have to be a complete full-blown pension transfer. It can also just be a click. Yeah. and then understand how that works.
Again, there's things that I'm fascinated there. It's again evidence of how you take that test, learn, amplify methodology that you took from right at the beginning of startup days, and you're moving into the second phase. But same methodology, yes, bigger budgets, but still informing every next step that you take. The other part that is that both the great relationship that you've got with the wider team, but how you're building confidence within the management team to actually back moving from performance into brand campaigns. And I think that is something that many viewers and listeners will struggle with. I wonder if there's any more that you can talk to us about how you actually take people on that journey, because not everyone is going to be blessed with team members as perhaps willing. And so is there anything you can share as advice or support on that front?
Well, first of all, if your team is not supportive whatsoever, just leave.
Right.
I think that sounds like the easiest solution. But if they don't believe in the work you do, it's probably time for another place. And that's why sometimes you see the tenure of certain roles, marketing roles, short. So that sounds like a very weird thing to say, but that's probably for your own protection a really good thing. You shouldn't be proving yourself. But what you should be doing is prove to the business that a particular campaign, whether that's a brand campaign or a performance campaign you're trying to do, what are you trying to achieve? How are you going to measure that? Can you demonstrate something in a bottom line as AKA a spreadsheet? That's really helpful. They don't believe you from your blue eyes. They will believe what's in your projection. And try to do it small. So I made mistakes, quite a few actually. If you ask my colleagues, the team, but also our CEOs, she will tell oh yeah, remember that. Of course, we will never forget. But it's okay, because you've got to make mistakes in order to get right. So you can feel small and learn from it and then grow. I think the struggle that people often make is they want to go into big too soon. We made a mistake by going on an outdoor campaign very early on in our process. And actually, that wasn't the right time to do that. And I've learned from that mistake, but it was a calculated mistake. It was in a particular region, so it wasn't too big. But so if you propose something, can you measure it? Can you talk spreadsheets? It's really important. Can you do it small? And therefore, if you then start to see some traction, you've got the confidence, you're building confidence, and they will notice that, and they will sign off on the bigger piece. And that's I think, the two things that I say are quite instrumental. And you get the biggest non-believer, I would say, of brand building for financial services on board if you could do it like that.
Let's keep the conversation going. Focus for now into brand campaigns. We've started off with the, let's say, more direct response ads. Again, I know, read the articles about the development of distinctive brand assets. Fascinating approach. Again, it's all on the blog if anyone wants to see more information. But talk to me about the development of the bee, and then it's going to lead us into the higher end TV work that you're now doing.
Yeah, we've got our own bee.
It's beautiful.
It's one of those things from the start, not just me, but everybody at PensionBee, we've always been very, very keen on creating a brand, a very distinctive brand that our customers can believe in. Can we make you pension confident? Can we excite you about pension? It's a positive brand. It's a positive message compared to some of the drab you sometimes see if you do this, this will happen. So that was always very important for us, that it's a positive message. We are giving you back control. Aside from that message and your proposition, how do you add to that? So you've got a PensionBee. It is like bringing your pension pots into your beehive. Guess what? Our online account is called the Beehive. Right. Our customer success manager, you've got your own dedicated customer success manager. That's, by the way, unheard of in the pension industry. Okay. Try to ring up a pension provider. Good luck with that. It's like calling an airline for compensation. Our pickup rate is 20 seconds. You get your own beekeeper. It's your own dedicated beekeeper. It's your customer success manager. And pension administrators are nectar collectors. So from the start, that was kind of how we... And you think that might be funny, or that might not be serious. you know what? People remember that.
Yeah,
that's something that comes
retrieval
through.
cues again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of actually using that in building a brand you can believe in. The second thing is you can take it a step further. So yellow, it's unusual for a pension company. So yellow. If you see our TV ad, you see is a golden filter in everything we do. It's that almost like that Kellogg's cornflakes morning breakfasty kind of feeling.
Right.
Everything we do on our ads, there is a yellowish glow over it. Again, it recognizes that. Using your own customers, everything you see is real customers.
Wow.
And they always will wear something yellow. That all of these little things, I'm really keen on making sure that all of these little bits are being followed through. Working with a fantastic ad agency on the side, by the way. It's not just me. It's the whole team who makes it happen.
Yeah.
And we came to a point. Can you believe in the bee?
Right.
And that's when the penny dropped. We are like, can you believe in the bee? And therefore, we introduced our bee, animated pixel by pixel from an animation studio in Stockholm.
That's phenomenal.
It's absolutely expensive, but it is so worth it.
Yeah.
And the bee is now flying from customer to customer in our ads campaign, which we launched, over a year ago now. Flying from customer to customer, reminding them that they can believe in the bee. And again, it was a step change. Would we have done this from the start now? Where you built on it, and you remain consistent. There are some financial brands, and I'm not mentioning any names here today, that will have changed their brand identity quite a few times. And if you have to, we've done a rebrand once, our logo, etc. But you've got to stay consistent to reap the benefits of investing in the brand that your customer can believe in. And unfortunately, a lot of brands keep changing their minds, and it's detrimental to their success.
I do wonder if that is also part of the fact that you mentioned earlier, the longevity of you being in there as a CMO. People in the industry like to come in, put their stamp on things. You being there has given that consistency of individual running the ship. The bit I guess I'm fascinated about around the bee is the, again, where we've moved to from startup methodology in marketing. Now we're at the point of we're creating a high-end distinctive brand asset. I mean, if you study Ehrenberg Bast, distinctive brand assets is one of their key components that they talk about. So again, with the sophistication that we're moving into is fascinating.
Yeah, and also with that sophistication and maturity, so also does your customer base mature, which is also fascinating to see. In the beginning, when you are still small, you can still, I would say, make mistakes, or you can still test and learn. And I mean, we had a whole different color scheme at one point that at the start, because it was very much test and learn. But then you start to grow up as a brand. Our retention rate is 97% plus. So when people join, they don't leave. And you start to learn a lot more from their customers. So we are growing up, but our customers are growing up too. And I think that's when you get to a point when you get into this territory, like knowing exactly what you want to be, how you want to be perceived. Also knowing how that actually helps us to acquire and increasingly retain customers.
Yeah.
And therefore the distinctive brand assets are absolutely key. And it goes through your email signature all the way out to a TV ad. It has to be.
Those retention rates sounds like a very high number. Do you know what the industry standard is in pensions?
That's a very good question. It will be lower. The reality is that pension is a very sticky product.
Okay.
So would you move your life savings to a startup? I wouldn't.
Yeah.
As a CMO, why would you? I wouldn't say the floodgates are open, but it's a lot easier now because we matured and we're much more like bona fide, established brand. We're not a startup anymore. We are like a proper online pension provider. So it has become easier. But when people move, they don't tend to move next year back to another provider. It's not as buying home insurance.
No.
I would say it's probably stickier than switching bank accounts.
Yeah.
So once you are able to persuade people that actually you are the company that makes them pension confident and they can build a happy retirement with PensionBee, gotta do a really bad job to lose them.
Yeah.
But also we take it to a next level. We try to keep delighting our customers when they sign up, because the journey hasn't stopped when you consolidate. It's just starting.
Yes, yeah.
Like lots of customers now need to take money out of their pension. How do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you market that? How do you talk about that? We want to make sure that people see us as their main provider of choice rather than just a consolidation service. So will they consolidate all of their pension pots with us or just one or two on the side? So again, the journey is not ending. We haven't peaked. Like it's just starting really.
I guess the word that springs to mind is built again, taking it back to the previous conversation around distinctive brand assets and the importance. It's building trust in the consumers in mind.
Yeah.
Pensions, part of the financial services industry, Edelman Trust Barometer, financial services have been consistently at the bottom of that. You're going against a grain, not just of financial services, but of a range. By the sounds of the results that you're getting, you're moving PensionBee right up into being highly trusted as a brand by its consumers. And I'm guessing that it's all of these components working together. That's a reflection. There isn't a question in there. So where I'd like to move to now, just to keep us moving along, is staying in the bees theme. I think this is fantastic. I've been to the clubhouse, but maybe you could talk to us about the evolution of the bee and where you are now with partnerships.
I think you are referring to our Brentford partnership we've got. Yes. So for people who are into football, the Brentford Bees, PensionBee.
Your local team?
Yes, it is actually my local team. And although you probably will not believe it, it's not because of that. I did not make that connection. Somebody at Brentford did. And that happened just before lockdown. They picked up the phone and they made the name gimmick association. And I wasn't really looking for sports sponsorship at the time because we were small. We're talking about 2019. There were maybe 50 people in the company and the budgets weren't there. And I had no idea what this actually costed. But I did find it quite interesting simply because I knew there's a couple of reasons why you would consider something like this.
Right.
One of them is, Jasper, why don't you spend that money on a TV campaign? Or why don't you just pump it into paid search and get the customers through that way? Hopefully, customers will make rational decisions when they choose a new pension provider. But there's actually something else. And that is, I've seen them on TV. I've seen them on the billboards. I've seen them on an LED boards. I've seen them on the sleeve or on the front of shirts or anything like that. And people think, legit, they're not going away next year. It's like, I wouldn't say the John Lewis in pensions, but it's an embedded brand.
Yeah.
I can trust that. So they put trust in that. So for me, a sports sponsorship builds on that trust, that channel has a built-in trust factor that I want to leverage as a brand. Mm-hmm. So that was something I had in my mind. But then Brentford, the story of Brentford is amazing. After 74 years, they've been promoted into the Premier League, would you believe it? I signed a contract a couple of weeks before they were promoted. And then they moved, and I was in Wembley when it actually happened, and I saw that commercial team completely celebrating. We did upped our engagement as we get along. So as we were becoming more Brentford confident, we've actually been increasing our engagement with them. Their story about being like the small kids, like David Goliath kind of comparison, and suddenly they're this club using data, with a limited budget, getting amazing results. I mean, they're currently somewhere in the top 10.
Yeah.
They ended in the top 10. They probably will end up in the top 10. I hope so.
Yeah.
But it's quite amazing what they do. So we thought that's a great story. We kind of a PensionBee, kind of David and Goliath. We kind of new kid on the block. The name gimmick is great.
Yeah.
And also they are reinventing football. You've been to the stadium before.
I've been to the old stadium.
Right.
Yeah, so I've seen where their transition from where they were.
Yeah.
I mean, their old stadium I went into the office, it was essentially like a shed on top of a stadium. So I've seen them go from there into coming, arguably one of the top stadiums in the UK.
But it's a very family-orientated club. It's a very inclusive club. I think they were the most inclusive club 3 years in a row. It's a different experience. Even the Times wrote an article about it recently about this is how football should be. Mm. So for us as a brand, being associated with a club like that is great. So you've got that. You've got the name gimmick. Mm. You've got the built-in trust factor. Then you need to look at, okay, how much money do I put in versus what I get back? What's the media value? So I would say in a good sports sponsorship, for every pound you put in, you get a couple of pounds, hopefully back in media value. So me, the equivalent of me advertising on TV, billboards or elsewhere.
I see, yeah.
And if you then compare it against over delivery on TV and radio, suddenly, again, you talk spreadsheets, suddenly under the line, it makes sense. You go to your team and say, look, this is the opportunity I've got. We were able to test something very small with Brentford at the start. I'm not going to mention any numbers because they will absolutely lynch me if I would do that. But it was a very small amount.
Yeah.
And they were willing to do that. And then we became more confident. We upped, during the season, we upped it. And then we ended up with sports sleeve sponsorship on the training kit and we did extra time, sponsoring the extra time on the LED. This year, for the next 3 years, we are official sleeve sponsor. That is quite a big commitment. However, we didn't do that overnight. So again, it's that build up from starting small, see what works. The word Brentford comes up in your word cloud in customer service. Prompted brand awareness amongst men has risen substantially more in the last year, which is an indicator because it's quite a lot of men will watch that sport. So we can see actually, okay, so it cuts through. And then you can up your activity. So it's been quite an interesting journey to be on.
Perhaps you can link this back, the sponsorship, into the higher end value TV advertising.
Yes. So we've had a sponsorship with them. I would say we weren't at the top of the sponsorship value yet. Every contract in sports will tell you have access to players like 5 minutes per year or whatever. Like they're very stipulated. But Brentford from the start said, look, we are just as new as you are in our world, just like you are in your world. Just tell us what you want to do. Now, I had an idea, and by the way, the idea actually came originally from our ad agency, the Builders Arms. They're amazing people. They like their football, so they always said, like, can we do something with Brentford? And I also woke up with, like, your best ideas happen when you want to go to sleep, right? So you have like a little black book with ideas. So you write these things down, and we came up in a meeting, like, well, how cool would it be if the bee would fly into the stadium? And there is a couple sitting in the audience. This was Steve's idea from Builders Arms. And the bee flies, and the guy's on his phone looking at his pension balance while the game is probably a little bit dead or whatever. And then he sees the bee, and he's like, he's confident. That was his idea. So I said, okay, good luck with that, asking the club. And I did. And guess what? They said, like, sounds like a great idea.
Amazing.
We ended up with a drone above the stadium during a Premier League football match, which... They have to ask Premier League because you can't just televise, film a live match. We had the Heathrow flight path. Wow. Like there's lots of things to contend with. I was sitting in the audience. I didn't have to do all of it, but I saw the team there with filming, and I saw the drone going up just outside of the stadium, and I was absolutely like stressed, like, oh, what's wrong? But then again, they did it. We had access to the football players, and guess what? They were there for an hour for us.
Amazing.
So all of these things fell into place. So that is a story I will never forget. But the result was that we suddenly had a bee, the drone, but that the bee, of course, animated into it, a bee flying into the stadium. And I think a lot of people thought, whoa, this is Brentford, or this is big. And I think that's why that ad became quite successful and cut through.
It's a fabulous ad. And again,
it's probably once in my lifetime. I think as a CMO, there's a couple of things that happen in your career. I think having been able to work with a Premier League football club, what are the chances that you end up doing that? So for me, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity.
I love hearing this, how it's gone from startup to this. I mean, this. I guess this is where do we go from here? It's that it's like you say, Premier League football club. TV advertising, huge growth. What does the next couple of years look like for you and PensionBee?
At the moment, they're still very much aligned. I mean, there is still something left in the tank, if I would say so. PensionBee, we want to get to 1 million customers as soon as possible. That's what we want to do. We want to become a major pension provider in the UK. It's a huge market. I feel we're just scratching the surface. With everything we've done. So I think we still have something to give. We want to be the pension specialist. We want to be your main provider of choice. So I think especially in marketing, there's a lot of things to test and learn how we're not persuading people, but we give people the ability to say, yeah, PensionBee is the right provider for you. So I think that's where we are. Who knows if we stay, we probably will explore other products, maybe other countries. But at the moment, we are very much focused on the UK because there's such an opportunity. And for me, I find it really interesting still to be quite involved, not just in how we market the product to customers, but also what kind of product comes with it. So it's the crossover between marketing and products. Call it product marketing or call it something else. It's a highly sought after skill set.
And this is the element that you talked about earlier about how the marketing has kind of shaped the product, and you still see this very much of PensionBee evolving.
Yeah, we can't sell a product that the customers don't want.
No.
So we've got to tell product that whatever we do in our channel, it ain't working. So is the product still okay? Is a good indicator, aside from lots of other things like customer research. A good example was last year where, aside from our main proposition, which is combining your old pensions, a lot of our customers said, I actually want a little bit more say in terms of where my money is invested in. And what's in the market at the moment is, in my opinion, a box-ticking exercise generally. Yeah. It's ESG, woo-hoo, tick-tick. Mm-mm. But actually, is it really the case, or is it just simply greenwashing? And consumers are rightly so a bit worried if that's happening. So we listen to our customers, and that is customer research. Right. We asked one of our asset managers to build that product that wasn't there. BlackRock developed a fund that is exactly doing that. It's called PensionBee Impact. It's something I've not seen before in the pension market. And then you test it, and then you learn, and then you run campaigns and see, do customers actually want this? Does it actually hit the nerve of the consumer so they can take action? So even today, we are following that approach and listening to what customers say, but also, can we market this? Is there a market for it? Otherwise, why would you introduce it?
The research now that you're doing with are you sitting down, speaking directly, focus group, traditional level market research, or is it again the test and learn methodology by putting it out content and ideas into the market and seeing reactions? Both.
It's both. I mean, we've got a fantastic research team now that does customer qualitative and quantitative research with customers or non-customers all the time. When somebody leaves a feedback on our Trustpilot, whether it's a 5-star or a 1-star, it does happen, of course, in every company. Yeah. It's actually on our company Slack channel. Everybody sees it. Right. So we all see if we're doing something right, if we're doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. In our show and tell, our town hall, every Thursday, we open with a customer interview. And we listen to what those customers actually say. The whole company checks in. So I think it's keeping that customer really close to us, because if they don't trust us anymore, then what are we doing it for? And then I guess there's a lot of test and learning. So we've launched a couple of products over the years that didn't work. I'm not going to disclose which ones they are, but we did have some, and they just simply didn't work. And then at least we've tried and tested and got feedback from customers. And sometimes you just have to say, no, it's not working. Let's move on to the next big thing that we believe could really change.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sitting down with us, sharing all this. There's so much knowledge there that you've gone on with your career. We could dive into any aspect of that. We'd need a few more hours for the podcast to do that, but it's fascinating for people listening that are not CMOs of a fast track fintech like you are. What would be the advice that you would give to perhaps someone more at the beginning of their career?
Well, first of all, when I joined PensionBee, I wasn't a CMO, so I turned into one, and I think the way I turned into one was, marketing is such a fast-moving practice. You can't be a specialist in everything. So you've got to be a sponge and soak up all the stuff, that's knowledge that's come to you. So get your teeth into something new, whether that is like understanding how TikTok could work for your brand or not, or how brand building actually works for long term. So, just acknowledge that you can't know everything from the start, but the ability to learn and test things small, fail small, but also and learn from it and then grow. I think that's really important. And the second piece of advice is, I'm a creative marketer from heart. I am not a data man. And I think my boss will tell me exactly, that's what it is. I like to dream. I like to think about brand, and that's really what drives me, and solving a problem, etc. I'm not very keen with spreadsheets, but it's the one thing I have to learn.
Speak the language of the boardroom.
Absolutely, because they're not coming from marketing. If they are, you're lucky. They normally invest from investments, financial backgrounds, etc. So they want to see the numbers. And I wouldn't disagree with them now, being with PensionBee for 8 years. It's the way to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Jasper. Your story is inspirational. I've learnt so much. I'm sure our viewers have learnt a lot as well. So thank you again. Thank you for listening today to The Growth Engine. If you enjoyed this episode and like to hear more, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates, or on hubagency.co.uk. Thank you, and see you next time.